You interpret the avoidants' obsessive focus on you as indication they miss you romantically, as evidence they recognize what they lost, as sign they might be developing feelings that could motivate reconnection. You notice their constant monitoring of your social media, their frequent questions about you to mutual connections, their inability to stop tracking your life months or years after relationship ended. You assume this obsessive attention reflects lingering romantic attachment or regret about losing relationship with you. Yet, beneath their obsession lies different psychological reality that you have not considered. The avoidant envies you in profound ways that have nothing to do with romantic longing and everything to do with recognizing you possess capacities they lack, qualities they cannot access, freedoms their defensive structure prevents them from experiencing. They envy your ability to feel emotions fully without crippling fear of vulnerability, your capacity to express those feelings openly without defended suppression, your comfort with emotional intimacy that comes naturally to you while remaining impossible for their defended psychology. They envy your secure attachment style that allows you to form connections easily, to trust others without constant vigilance, to remain close to people without fearing engulfment or abandonment, to build relationships that sustain rather than relationships that require constant defended management. They envy your capacity for vulnerability that creates strength and depth in your relationships, while their defended avoidance of vulnerability creates isolation despite their surface independence. They envy your integrated wholeness, where your feelings and your actions align, where you can be authentically yourself without fragmentation, where you exist as coherent, unified person rather than as defended presentation, concealing wounded, authentic self. This envy generates their obsession because you represent everything their defensive structure costs them. You are living proof that another way of being exists, that emotional freedom is possible, that intimate connection can be sustained, that vulnerability creates rather than destroys. Their obsession is not romantic longing for you specifically, it is envious fixation on capacities you possess that they desperately want, yet cannot access without dismantling defensive structure that feels essential to their survival. Understanding their obsession stems from envy rather than romantic interest allows you to recognize their focus on you, reflects their internal struggle with their own limitations, rather than reflecting genuine desire for reconnection, prevents you from misinterpreting their attention as indication they have developed capacity for relationship, when actually their attention reflects recognition of capacities you have that they envy without being willing or able to develop those capacities themselves. They envy your capacity to feel and express emotions without crippling fear. The avoidant observes you experiencing full range of human emotions: joy, sadness, anger, fear, excitement, disappointment, and expressing those emotions authentically without apparent terror about what emotional expression will cost you. You cry when you are hurt without fearing that tears make you weak or vulnerable to exploitation. You express anger when you are wronged without fearing that anger will destroy relationships or make you unacceptable. You share excitement about positive experiences without suppressing enthusiasm to maintain defended, cool presentation. You communicate disappointment without fearing that expressing needs makes you burdensome. This emotional freedom appears effortless to you, natural extension of your internal experience, translating into external expression without defensive filtering or suppression. Yet for the avoidant, emotional experience and expression involve constant defended management that prevents the freedom you demonstrate. Every emotion that arises triggers defensive evaluation. Is this feeling safe to experience fully? Does this emotion threaten my defended position? Will expressing this feeling create vulnerability that others can exploit? Does this emotional experience indicate dangerous dependence or need? The defensive evaluation typically concludes that full emotional experience is unsafe, that expression is dangerous, that feelings must be suppressed or minimized to maintain defended protection. This constant defensive management means the avoidant never experiences the emotional freedom you demonstrate. They are always regulating, always suppressing, always managing their internal experience to prevent feelings from reaching intensity that would threaten defenses. The avoidant particularly envies your ability to be sad or hurt, without that sadness indicating weakness or creating unbearable vulnerability. When you experience loss or disappointment or hurt, You allow yourself to feel those painful emotions, to express them through tears or through words, to seek comfort from others who care about you. This capacity to experience and express pain while remaining intact, while not falling apart, while maintaining your essential self demonstrates emotional resilience the avoidant lacks. Their defensive structure cannot tolerate such open experience of pain because their childhood taught them that expressing hurt leads to further hurt, that showing pain makes them target for additional harm, that vulnerability around painful feelings results in those feelings being used against them or being dismissed as excessive or manipulative. You also possess capacity to feel joy and express positive emotions without the defended dampening that characterizes avoidant emotional experience. When good things happen in your life, you feel genuine, uncomplicated happiness that you share openly with others. The avoidant observes this capacity with envy because their defensive structure dampens even positive emotions. Joy feels dangerous because it indicates caring about something which creates vulnerability to losing that thing. Excitement feels risky because it suggests attachment to outcome which conflicts with defended autonomy. Happiness feels threatening because it requires letting guard down in ways that expose them to potential pain if circumstances change. Their defended position requires emotional flattening that prevents experiencing the peaks of positive emotion you demonstrate naturally. The envy intensifies when the avoidant recognizes that your emotional freedom creates connection and depth in your relationships that their defended suppression prevents in theirs. Your willingness to express feelings allows others to know you authentically, creates intimacy through shared emotional experience, generates deep bonds that come from mutual vulnerability. Your tears allow others to comfort you and feel needed and useful. Your anger allows others to understand your boundaries and your values. Your joy allows others to celebrate with you and share your happiness. Your emotional expression creates relationship richness and depth that the avoidance defended suppression makes impossible. Their relationships remain surface level because emotional suppression prevents the vulnerability that creates depth. The avoidant also envies that your emotional expression does not cost you the things their defensive structure warns them emotional expression will cost. You cry and others comfort you rather than using your tears against you or viewing you as weak. You express anger and relationships survive rather than being destroyed by your legitimate feelings. You share excitement and others celebrate with you rather than dampening your enthusiasm or exploiting your caring. You communicate needs and people respond supportively rather than viewing you as burdensome. The avoidance defensive predictions about emotional expression causing harm are disproven by your experience, where emotional expression strengthens rather than damages relationships. Yet they cannot learn from observing your positive outcomes because their defensive structure interprets your experience as exception rather than as evidence their defensive predictions are wrong. The envy particularly manifests when the avoidant recognizes they have lost relationships specifically because their emotional suppression prevented the intimacy and connection that relationships require. They observe you building deep, satisfying relationships through emotional sharing, while they lose relationships because their defended suppression keeps people at distance that prevents genuine bonding. They recognize intellectually that emotional expression serves important relationship functions, yet they remain unable to express emotions without triggering defensive terror about vulnerability. They watch you living emotionally free life. Their defenses prevent them from accessing. This observation generates envy because you demonstrate daily that emotional expression is possible and relationship enhancing, while their experience is that emotional expression feels impossible and relationship threatening. Understanding that the avoidant envies your capacity to feel and express emotions without crippling fear allows you to recognize their obsessive focus on you, partly reflects fixation on emotional freedom they observe in you that they desperately want yet cannot achieve without dismantling defenses that feel essential to survival. They are not obsessed with you romantically. They are obsessed with capacity you demonstrate that represents everything their defensive structure costs them. This envy-based obsession explains why they monitor your life so closely. They are watching you live emotionally free existence they envy, observing you express feelings they must suppress, witnessing you build intimate connections their defenses prevent. Yet their envy does not translate into action to develop similar emotional capacity, because developing such capacity would require exactly the vulnerability about feelings that their envy stems from being unable to tolerate. You possess the secure attachment and connection ease they'll never naturally have. The avoidant observes you forming relationships, apparently effortlessly, connecting with people naturally, building friendships and intimate bonds that sustain across time, without the constant anxiety and defensive management that characterizes their relationship experience. You meet someone new, and conversation flows easily without you calculating every response to maintain defended distance. You develop feelings for someone, and you express those feelings without terror about what caring will cost you. You have long-term friendships that involve consistent contact and mutual support without you needing to create distance to manage engulfment fears. You maintain intimate partnership where you can be close without panicking about losing yourself, where you can be autonomous without fearing abandonment, where you can trust your partner's consistency without constant vigilance about potential betrayal or rejection. This secure attachment and connection ease that feels natural to you represents capacity the avoidant will never naturally possess without intensive therapeutic work to restructure their attachment system. Their childhood experiences created insecure avoidant attachment, where relationships feel inherently threatening, where closeness activates engulfment fears, where distance activates abandonment anxiety they defend against through deactivation, where trusting others feels dangerous because past trust led to disappointment or harm. These early attachment wounds created nervous system that responds to intimacy with threat rather than with safety, that experiences connection as dangerous rather than nourishing, that requires constant defended management of relationships to maintain tolerable anxiety levels. The avoidant envies that relationships feel safe and rewarding to you in ways relationships never feel safe or consistently rewarding to them. You experience closeness as comforting rather than as suffocating. You feel autonomous within relationships rather than feeling you must choose between connection and independence. You trust that people who care about you will remain consistent rather than constantly monitoring for signs of impending abandonment or betrayal you must protect against. You can be vulnerable with people you trust without fearing that vulnerability will be exploited or will result in rejection. You experience relationships as net positive that enhances your life, rather than as net threat requiring constant defensive management to prevent harm. The envy intensifies when the avoidant recognizes that your secure attachment allows you to repair relationship ruptures that would end their relationships. When conflict occurs or when disconnection happens, you can tolerate the discomfort, can communicate about the problem, can work toward resolution without immediately withdrawing or ending relationship to protect yourself from relationship distress. This repair capacity means your relationships survive normal relationship challenges, while the avoidance relationships end when challenges exceed their defended tolerance because they lack capacity to stay present and work through difficulty. They observe you maintaining relationships across years and decades, while their relationships typically end within months or couple years because their defended limitations prevent sustaining connection once initial infatuation phase passes. You also demonstrate capacity for interdependence that the avoidant envies but cannot access. You can rely on others while maintaining your independence, can support others while maintaining your boundaries, can be close while being autonomous, can need people without losing yourself. This balanced interdependence represents integration the avoidant cannot achieve because their defensive structure operates through extremes. Either complete independence that prevents genuine connection or overwhelming engulfment that threatens their sense of self. They cannot find the middle ground you naturally occupy where connection and autonomy coexist rather than conflicting. They watch you managing this balance apparently effortlessly while they struggle with constant tension between their need for connection and their fear of closeness. The avoidant particularly envies that you can form new attachments without the defended hesitation and testing that characterizes their approach to new relationships. When you meet someone you like, you can open yourself to connection relatively quickly, can allow relationship to develop naturally, can trust your judgment about whether a person is safe and worthy of investment. The avoidant must maintain defended distance through extended period of testing and evaluating, must protect themselves through keeping new people at arm's length until sufficient evidence accumulates that person will not harm them, must suppress their own attachment feelings to prevent becoming vulnerable, before they have determined the person deserves their trust. This defended approach means they often lose potential connections with good people who will not wait through extended testing period. They watch you building relationships with these same people who gave up on the avoidant because defended distance felt like disinterest or rejection. The envy also extends to your capacity to enjoy intimacy that the avoidant finds threatening. You can share your internal world with people close to you without fearing that being known will result in rejection. You can express needs and wants without fearing that having needs makes you weak or burdensome. You can accept care and support from others without fearing that accepting help creates dangerous dependence. You can be emotionally present with others without fearing that presence will trap you in obligations you cannot escape. The avoidant observes you experiencing intimacy as a source of joy and fulfillment, while their experience of intimacy always includes anxiety and defended management that prevents full enjoyment of connection. Understanding that the avoidant envies your secure attachment and connection ease allows you to recognize their obsession partly reflects fixation on relationship capacity they observe in you, that their attachment wounds prevent them from developing naturally. They watch you living relationally connected life. Their insecure attachment makes impossible building sustaining friendships, maintaining intimate partnership, forming new connections easily, repairing relationship ruptures, enjoying interdependence. This observation generates envy because you demonstrate daily that secure attachment allows relationship ease, while their experience is that relationships require constant, defended vigilance and management that prevents the natural connection you demonstrate. Yet their envy does not motivate them to do the therapeutic work to heal their attachment wounds, because such healing would require sustained vulnerability and relationship work their defended structure resists. They can envy your secure attachment while maintaining the insecure attachment that generates their envy, can obsess over your connection ease while being unable to develop similar ease themselves. Your ability to be vulnerable makes you powerful in ways they can't access. The avoidant observes you demonstrating vulnerability, admitting when you need help, expressing when you feel hurt, communicating your fears and insecurities, acknowledging your mistakes and limitations, asking for what you need, and rather than this vulnerability making you weak or exploitable as the avoidance defensive structure predicts, vulnerability will make them. Your vulnerability makes you powerful in ways that confuse and disturb their defended worldview. People respond to your vulnerability with care and support rather than with exploitation or rejection. Your admission of needs makes others feel trusted and needed rather than burdened. Your expression of feelings creates intimacy that strengthens relationships rather than creating discomfort that pushes people away. Your acknowledgement of limitations makes you seem authentic and trustworthy rather than weak and inadequate. Your vulnerability generates power through connection, through others' increased investment in you, through depth of relationships that vulnerability allows, through authenticity that vulnerability demonstrates. This vulnerability as strength represents complete inversion of the avoidance defensive assumptions that organize their entire psychological structure. Their defenses developed from childhood learning that vulnerability leads to harm. Showing need resulted in disappointment or rejection. Expressing feelings led to those feelings being used against them or dismissed. Admitting limitations led to criticism or abandonment. Asking for help resulted in being made to feel burdensome. These experiences taught them that vulnerability is dangerous, that self-protection requires defended suppression of needs and feelings, that power comes from independence and emotional control rather than from openness and connection. Your demonstration that vulnerability creates rather than destroys, that openness generates rather than loses power, contradicts their entire defended understanding of how relationships and human interaction work. The avoidant envies the specific powers that your vulnerability generates, that their defended self-protection prevents them from accessing. Your vulnerability creates deep intimacy in your relationships, because sharing your internal experience allows others to know you authentically, generates reciprocal vulnerability where others share themselves in return, builds trust through demonstrated willingness to be seen in your full complexity, including your struggles and limitations. This intimacy creates relationships of depth and meaning that the avoidance defended distance prevents. Their suppression of vulnerability keeps relationships surface level because genuine intimacy requires vulnerability they cannot demonstrate without triggering defensive terror. Your vulnerability also generates social support networks that provide tangible resources and emotional sustenance the avoidant lacks. When you express that you are struggling, people offer help and support. When you share your challenges, people provide advice and perspective and practical assistance. When you admit you need something, people feel honored to provide it and feel more connected to you through providing it. The avoidant observes you receiving this abundant support that flows from your willingness to be vulnerable about your needs, while their defended independence prevents them from receiving similar support. They cannot ask for help because asking feels like admitting weakness. They cannot express struggles because expressing difficulty feels like inviting judgment. They cannot show need because need feels like dangerous dependence. Their defended self-reliance leaves them isolated and unsupported even when they are struggling, while your vulnerability creates community of people invested in your well-being. You also demonstrate that vulnerability creates leadership and influence through authenticity that defended presentation cannot replicate. People trust you because your willingness to show your struggles and limitations makes you seem genuine and relatable rather than perfect and distant. Your authenticity generates respect because people recognize the courage required to be vulnerable rather than maintaining defended facade. Your openness invites others' openness, creating environments where people feel safe being authentic because you model that authenticity. The avoidant envies this authentic influence because their defended presentation generates distance rather than connection, skepticism rather than trust, performance rather than genuine relating. The avoidant particularly envies that vulnerability allows you to get your needs met, while their defended suppression of needs leaves their needs chronically unmet. You can express directly what you need from others: emotional support, practical help, changed behavior, more time together, space when overwhelmed, and others generally attempt to provide what you need because you have made your needs clear. The avoidant cannot express needs directly because expressing needs violates their defended self-concept as person who needs nothing, because asking feels like exposing weakness others can exploit, because communicating needs feels like placing burdensome demands on others. This suppression means their needs remain unmet. Others cannot provide what the avoidant has not communicated needing, cannot support the avoidant in ways they would support if they understood what the avoidant needed. The avoidant watches you getting needs met through vulnerable expression, while their needs remain unmet through defended suppression. The power differential between your vulnerability and their defended protection becomes particularly apparent in romantic relationships. Your capacity for vulnerability allows you to build genuine intimacy with partners who know you authentically and love you, including your imperfections and struggles. Your ability to express needs allows partners to provide for you in ways that make them feel valued and useful. Your willingness to admit when you are wrong allows relationship repair after conflicts. Your comfort with interdependence allows partnership where both people support each other. The avoidance defended suppression prevents all these relationship strengthening capacities. Their inability to be vulnerable prevents genuine intimacy. Their suppression of needs prevents partners from providing for them. Their difficulty admitting fault prevents repair. Their defended independence prevents genuine partnership. They observe you building what they want through capacities they lack and envy. Understanding that the avoidant envies your ability to be vulnerable in ways that create power allows you to recognize their obsession reflects fixation on capacity they observe in you that generates influence, connection, support, intimacy they desperately want but cannot access through their defended position. They watch vulnerability creating strength in your life, while their experience is that defended protection creates isolation and unmet needs. This observation generates envy, because you demonstrate vulnerability works in direct contradiction to everything their defensive structure taught them about vulnerability being dangerous. Yet their envy does not translate into practicing vulnerability themselves, because vulnerability requires dismantling defenses that feel essential to survival, requires risking the harm their childhood taught them vulnerability invites. They can envy your vulnerability-generated power while maintaining defended suppression that prevents accessing similar power, can obsess over the intimacy and support your vulnerability creates, while being unable to create similar intimacy through allowing similar vulnerability themselves. They obsess because you represent the integrated wholeness their defenses fragment. The avoidant observes you existing as coherent, integrated person, where your internal experience and your external presentation align, where your feelings and your actions match, where you can be authentically yourself across different contexts without fragmentation or performance. What you feel internally, you express externally without defensive filtering. What you value, you demonstrate through your behavior. What you need, you communicate and pursue. What you think, you articulate without extensive editing to maintain image. This integration means you exist as unified, whole person rather than as fragmented self that shows different faces in different contexts, rather than as defended presentation concealing authentic internal experience, rather than as person whose external actions contradict internal feelings. The avoidance defensive structure creates fundamental fragmentation that prevents the integration you demonstrate naturally. They feel emotions internally that they cannot express externally because expression violates defended position. They have needs they cannot acknowledge or pursue because need conflicts with defended independence. They value connection, yet they behave in ways that prevent connection because closeness activates defenses. They care about people, yet they cannot demonstrate that care adequately because demonstration requires vulnerability their defenses forbid. This split between internal experience and external presentation, between feelings and actions, between wants and behaviors, creates fundamental fragmentation where the avoidant exists as divided self, defended external presentation, and suppressed authentic internal experience that rarely align or integrate. The fragmentation manifests through the avoidant maintaining separate personas that shift based on context and defensive needs. They present as independent and self-sufficient while secretly longing for connection. They appear emotionally controlled while experiencing intense feelings they cannot express. They demonstrate confidence while internally experiencing insecurity about their adequacy and their lovability. They project that they need nothing while their unmet needs accumulate and generate suffering they cannot articulate. These contradictions between presentation and internal reality create exhausting defended management, where they must constantly monitor which self to show, which feelings to suppress, which needs to deny to maintain defended position. The avoidant envies your integration because integration allows you to live without the exhausting, constant defended management that fragmentation requires. You do not need to calculate what version of yourself to present in each interaction because you simply are yourself authentically. You do not need to suppress feelings that contradict your image because your image reflects your actual experience. You do not need to deny needs because acknowledging needs does not threaten your self-concept. You do not need to hide parts of yourself because all parts coexist without contradiction. This ease of existing as unified self represents relief from defended burden. The avoidant carries constantly burden of maintaining defended presentation, of suppressing authentic experience, of managing fragmentation that integration would eliminate. You also demonstrate that integration creates consistency that generates trust and depth in relationships that the avoidance fragmentation prevents.